Hello, this is Tim Dean. I'm the person in charge of the Workforce Planning Unit, and this is the third in a series of 10 sessions that I'll be presenting to you and hopefully with your interaction on managing workforce planning, BSB HRM 513. Previously, I gave you an introduction in the first week. The second week, we talked about supply of labour. This week we are talking about demand for labour. So let's check to see where things are at in relation to that, and what the background that I'm looking for in relation to workforce planning.
Okay, well just hold it then and then we'll allocate it on Monday.
Okay. Let's look at why understanding demand for labour is essential for workforce planning. So the first main thing that we need to look at is external demand. Businesses need to be aware of the growth trends in general demand for goods and services in Australia. If the business is Australia-wide, the business needs to consider how the whole economy is going. Or if only in a particular area, they need to understand growth and potential growth in that area. And if there's various levels of growth across Australia, and they've got businesses in various areas, they need to anticipate what that's going to mean for their business in that particular state. And if certain states bring in measures to attract more business or to stir up that state's economy, well, they need to be aware of that so they can become part of that. And the overall growth in Australia, measured as just gross domestic product, can be reflected in the growth in their particular business. If general growth is expected in Australia, there may be business growth. If the business is in construction, for instance, then building new houses, flats, commercial premises will add to the potential demand for their goods and services. Overall growth in Australia is measured by gross domestic product, as I already mentioned. And GDP is the money value of finished goods and services produced over a period of time in Australia, which is paid. That is, voluntary work is not included. So that means if I get someone to mow my lawn at home and come in and do some gardening, that adds to gross domestic product. But if I do it myself, it does not. The only part of it that does add to gross domestic product is my purchase of petrol and other garden implements. But the rest of it, of course, does not add. So that's the way it works. So all those voluntary hours we do at home and for others don't add to gross domestic product according to the measure that is current. So the growth in demand are indicators. Australia-wide, again, you can go through abs.gov.au, and I'll go there in a moment. One issue is population growth, Australia-wide and by region. Another one that you can look at, and these are just general ones, I could have a list of various things. They say, is building approvals. Now, building approvals is interesting because if buildings are approved, they'll probably be built later on. And when you build buildings, of course, that adds to demand for those materials and also labour. Beef production. If beef production rises, it means that there's more beef to sell. Also might mean that that would be an indication that beef can be sold overseas. Then there's total construction as well. You can look at personal services. You can look at as well. There's been a growth in personal services in recent years, such as various medical and paramedical services offered. Also, fitness trainers. You can go on and on about that. So let's have a look at the ABS. Okay. So let's have a look at a few things here. Firstly, the population clock. That's 24,900. One new person every 1 minute and 24 seconds. So that's an indication that as the population grows, there is naturally going to be a growth in demand for goods and services. And if the population grows in certain areas more quickly than others, that may be an opportunity for a company to move in that area and take advantage of that. Consumer price index is an indicator of basically of inflation, and it's quite low at the moment. Gross domestic product is what I've been talking about. The quarterly change was only 0.4%. But let's have a look at some more figures in that. Okay, let's have a look at this. So you can see 0.4% seasonally adjusted. Over the year, gross domestic product grew by 2.4%. That means compared with the previous year, there's 2.4% more activity in the production of goods and services in Australia, which are obviously, in most cases, sold, either in Australia or overseas. That would mean that there's been an increase in demand for those goods and services, which leads to an increase in demand for labour. So but this is very generally across Australia, but you can narrow it down to industries and you can narrow it down to locations as well. So let's have a look at some more information there. You can see there that the economy grew by 0.4%. So that's not a big growth. If that happened throughout the whole year, it'd be only 1.6% growth, which is quite low. And household consumption increased by 1% for the quarter. That's also quite low. Perhaps that's a little bit higher. Compensation for employees has grown by 1.1%, which is better than previous quarters. But export of goods and services was less than the previous period. So they're the December key figures in relation to gross domestic product. Let's look at some of the latest releases. Total dwelling finances increase. That could be an indicator of if the finance for dwellings increases, it means people are more willing to buy dwellings, and if they're new dwellings, that can add more to gross domestic product. If they're just current dwellings, well, that might just lead to an inflation in price. So therefore, you can see there in February 2018, there's 33,261 total dwellings commitments in millions of dollars, 33,261,000, which is a change of 1% from the previous year. Owner-occupied, breaking up into owner-occupied and investment housing. So you can see owner-occupied housing is continuing to grow, but investment housing has come back a bit, partly because of the banks have put measures in to make it harder for people to easily get loans for investment. So that was the value, then there's a total number that indicates that there's a slight, therefore it shows a tiny decrease in the year unoccupied, quite a bigger increase in construction of dwellings, a decrease has gone down, and purchase of new dwellings has gone up. Okay. So that can mean a number of things, but it would mean that there's probably some issues in construction at the moment in relation to construction of dwellings, which adds to that industry, or detracts from that industry in this case. So this is information that can be utilised. Let's have another look at another one. You find data for your region. Look at this. Or perhaps not. Okay, that's not working at the moment, so we'll move on to something else. Okay. So as a result of that, there's a flow on for the demand for labour. There's an increase or decrease in demand for labour. If the demand for goods and services rise, so does the demand for labour to produce these goods and services. But not necessarily at the same rate. For instance, I showed you that if there's an increase in GDP by 2.4%, that may only lead, for instance, to an increase of demand for labour by 1.5% to 2%, because there will always be savings in using technology and things like that. Okay. Let's have a look at the technology effect on demand for labour. There's world trends in particular industries, which are, and the Australian industry in that area has to reflect that. So obviously there's world trends in computer systems and call center processes, the making of vehicles, the making of various machines and things like that, which can create issues. One of the world trends in, say, in motor vehicle manufacture over the last 20 years is economies of scale. So only the really big plants seem to be able to produce vehicles at a sustainable rate, which people are willing to buy. Therefore, that's one reason why the Australian motor vehicle industry has diminished. So, but you can also look at mining, banking, warehousing. Mining is very much technology based, and there's less need for individuals and more need for proper machinery. Banking is a big example, both through online banking, automatic ATMs, and also less and less backroom staff. More things are computerized. Warehousing is another example. Warehouses to hold goods, in particular for various retail enterprises, and now many are very much automated. So you press buttons and boxes are packed, and there's minimal human handling compared to the older days. And of course, there's the online versus the face-to-face sales. There's a greater reliance on online because it costs a lot less. However, it does rely on people being comfortable with that approach, and more people, of course are comfortable with online sales. However, there is a place still for face-to-face sales, and if you find a market niche in that area, you may be able to utilise that. So one of the things that come down is the cost of labour versus the cost of technology. As technology has increased, the use of technology increased over the years, companies will only introduce technology when it's cheaper for them to utilise that technology versus labour. So if the technology, the machines, the computer systems can actually replace labour, you look at the cost of the technology and the cost of replacement versus the cost of that labour. And eventually you come to a point where you say, yes, it's easier to bring in this new technology because the technology is upgrading all the time to replace a lot of our more manual labour or lower level clerical labour. And this is what happens in most organisations, especially if the cost of labour rises. So one answer for why there's been perhaps a recent minimal cost of labour is, of course, perhaps people are concerned if they do put the labour cost up too much, organisations will turn technology. That's just an opinion. A moderate demand for unskilled labour can change to a lower demand for higher skilled labour as the cost of labour rises and the cost of technology falls. Your labour can't be completely replaced, so you need higher skilled labour to actually run the technology and get the best out of the technology that you can, the best use of it. And to do that, you need probably have people with higher skills, higher abilities. And so that's what generally happens. So you might have had 100 staff, now you only need 50 staff, but they need to be more highly skilled. Therefore, the market for unskilled labour in a particular sector of industry disappears. And so unskilled labour either have to skill themselves. If they can't do that, they have to move to another industry where unskilled or semi-skilled labour is still in the majority. And they're fairly menial jobs, perhaps in building construction, like one area, obviously people hold signs at roadworks and things like that. Perhaps some areas of hospitality can never be replaced. So, an example in HRM, before a HR section had a number of staff to deal with the day-to-day mundane running of the HR side of the organisation. Now it's possibly being replaced by HRIS, Human Resource Information System, which everyone has got access to because it's user-friendly. So the local HR person may not be required as much as before. A local business may think, oh, they're fairly safe from this, but unfortunately, more and more local businesses have to deal with global competition. Even if it's the big supermarkets, which means the local corner shop might close down, or local business is fine, that they're going to have to become part of a franchise or larger chain to survive, and in doing that, they then are subject to global competition. Let's have a look at demand for labour and unemployment. So, as I said before, the labour market consists of a supply of labour and the demand for that labour. And I've also mentioned before there's one huge labour market in Australia, and then there's multiple thousands of minor labour markets based on particular skill and the work environment and the location, geographic location. So if there's an excess of supply over demand overall in Australia, that results in an unemployment rate. So let's have a look at the ABS here in relation to that, in relation to unemployment. Okay. Okay, here we go. So this gives you a lot of information about employment and unemployment in Australia. You can see there's job vacancies, labour force in Australia, labour force Australia detailed quarterly, labour force overall, industrial disputes, etc. Goes on and on. So let's choose the basic one, labour force in Australia. And you'll see here that we talked about this last week to an extent. Unemployed people, 725,000 in Jan 2018, 729,000 now. 4.3% and a reduction of 1.4%. Why would you think that it's gone down by 1.4% when it seems to have risen? The answer is, of course, the population is much greater this year than last year. Keep in mind the population is growing by over a couple of 100,000 a year. So obviously, but overall you can see unemployed people, the amount of unemployment has dropped by 1.4% overall. Unemployed persons, and the rate has dropped by 2.2%. The participation rate has grown. So that's an interesting one. So that means basically that more people are participating. So if the participation rate had not grown, there would have been higher unemployment because there would have been, in fact, the participation rate had not grown, there would have been less unemployment. Okay, because those people wouldn't have been looking for a job. So it looks fairly healthy in that regard. Okay. Okay. So technology and global competition drives business to lower the cost of labour by either making labour more productive, that is better systems, education, or replacing some labour with technology. So that's what business tends to look for, and your business may well be looking for that. There may be a short to medium term excess of supply of labour as industries and organisations replace labour with technology, or they close down or restructure as they can't compete locally or globally. Individuals either retrain, retire, or perhaps become long-term unemployed. But what happens basically, because what's happened, if a person becomes unemployed and they go on Centrelink benefits, Centrelink tries to help them to find work in a new industry. And once they do that, then they move into that new industry and they're no longer unemployed. So, but in the short term, the medium term, they may be unemployed. If you're an older person, you may be unemployed for longer periods of time. Let's have a look again at joboutlook.gov.au in relation to the demand for labour. Okay, here we go. So just choose, for instance, the one I chose last week, the carpenter. Okay, so let's have a look. Carpenters and joiners. So you'll see in this example that future growth is stable. That means that it's going to grow at about the same rate as the economy. The employment size is that. Unemployment is average, which means the unemployment rate is, say, 5%. Well, the unemployed number of carpenters will be about 5%. Again, it's a huge male share of that space, and it's mostly full-time. So if you look at prospects, you'll see that employed in 2017, outlook for 2022, about the same number, yet the economy will be growing in between in that time. So obviously, there's not going to be an increase of jobs for carpenters in the next 5 years, even though the economy itself will be growing over the next 5 years. However, what may well happen is that there may be 50,000 job openings for people who may leave carpentry. So there'll be a turnover of people who retire or go into other industries. They work in most parts of Australia. They mainly work in construction, manufacturing, and professional scientific and technical services. Almost all work full-time. Okay. Just look at a human resource manager. All right. So in general, there's the average weekly pay. Future growth for strong bachelor degree or higher is recommended, but also the diploma in human resource management is a good starting point to become a human resource manager as well. So future growth is listed as strong. Employment size, 46,000. Unemployment is average. Male share and female share is about equal. Female share a little bit more than male. Full-time share. I'm a bit surprised. I would have thought females' share would have been stronger than that, and full-time share would have been stronger as well. But not the case. Let's have a look at prospects again. Large occupation. Number of workers has fallen, and the reason why it's fallen is that some people have been replaced by technology, but it's coming back. It's growing because they've recognised the need for HR in business, and there was a temporary need. There was a temporary desire to cut down HR because they couldn't see their worth. But HR now is doing a good selling process to sell HR as a profession. Okay. There's also job openings coming up as well. Not only is it going to grow, there's going to be 39,000 job openings as people move around. So employed, outlook for 2022. So it's a good, strong growth in HR. Weekly earnings, 600 above the average weekly earnings. There's the average hours per week. Main industries, all industries really, but obviously quite strong in public administration, professional areas, etc. States and territories. You also get figures relating to the states and territories in this as well. So New South Wales has the highest percentage overall, and it goes through to there, to the other states. Average age, slightly higher than all jobs because you need a profession and you need to work to get there. And there's that information. There's, okay, postgraduate certificate diploma is quite strong. 25% have got that. Or diploma, okay. Or 40% have got that. So basically what that indicates, while you get an entry-level job to finish an HR diploma, they may want you to go and get a high-level qualification to get the higher-level jobs in HR. That's probably what that may will mean. Okay, let's move back. Let's get going. Okay, let's move on quickly. So organisations change the demand for labour at increasing rates. Business owners make decisions about introduction of technology, what I've talked about, leading or following the market in offering new products or services. That may mean retraining and bringing in new people. Restructuring the staffing to make the organisation more efficient. That's happening on a regular basis. Adjusting staffing levels to reflect sales trends or government funding in non-profit organisations or in government organisations. So basically you can't rely on sales in government organisations, you need to look at funding to work out how you can actually adjust what you need to do to adjust your staffing levels. People might expand or contract the business. So examples, of course, of contraction be Ford and Holden in recent years, to almost nothing. Coles and Woolworths have continued to expand their businesses. So let's look at the internal issues now in relation to demand for labour. As a result of these management decisions, internal labour demand changes. Often fewer staff are required if the organisation contracts or wishes to maintain profitability. More staff are required if the organisation expands. Different mix of staff required if the organisation takes on new technology or new product. So these decisions can result in recruitment of new qualified staff, retraining of existing staff, promotions of talented staff, or redeployment or redundancy of excess staff. And I'll be covering a lot of these later on when we explicitly talk about your organisation in later presentations. Okay, to find out more, just contact myself here at my email address, or you can give me a ring on our staff number at any time. And thank you for that. Now that means this is the third presentation. I'll be doing the 4th, 5th, and 6th presentations starting on Friday week, not next Friday, but the following Friday. So that's all I had for you today. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope really you can share with me between 12 and 12:30 on at a later time, rather than have to come in after the event, because I prefer to have people chatting with me. Thank you, and I hope to talk to you soon.